Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Um, Today is a day that's devoted to a much lighter Shevet than the previous couple of Shiurim, which have been devoted to his older brother Dan. Today we are going to be discussing Naphtali. And I got here a couple of minutes earlier, and I opened with some footage of the Nachalah, the tribal allotment of Naphtali, to get us all in the mood for this very almost calming force within Am Yisrael. This force that I call the binder Shevet, the Shevet that draws all of Am Yisrael together with a in a harmonious way, in a comforting way that is the offset, or almost like the antidote to his older brother Dan. If I've struggled over the past two shiurim to try and articulate a very difficult, dark, and troubling, isolated, and powerful Shevet, Dan, Naphtali, his younger brother, comes almost as a relief. When Naphtali enters the satellite, or the constellation, let's say, of the family of Yaakov, it is immediately after the birth of Dan. And Rachel, of course, the one who conceived of Dan and who brought him into being, continues on. She decides to continue on with this coupling, with the surrogacy of her maidservant Bilhah, to have her continue a relationship with Yaakov so that she might be further built through Bilhah and add more of her essence into the family. So the pasuk right after the birth of Dan, it tells us about the conception and the birth of his younger brother Naphtali. And here we are in source number one, the 30th chapter of Genesis. Vatahar od, vateled bilha shivchat Rachel. So she's clearly an adjunct to Rachel. She conceives and she gives birth to another son, Ben Sheni Yaakov. Ben Sheni meaning Rachel's second son. Yaakov already has five sons. He has four sons from Leah plus Dan. And now this is essentially his sixth child, his second son from Rachel. And when Rachel names this son, it's less with the sense of great relief that she had felt upon being relieved of her distress. It's not Danani Elohim, God has judged me and has found me worthy to have a son. Now, it's the second born. She's already been a mother. She understands what it means to be a mother, and the second born brings with him a certain lightening, a certain ease, beyond which Dan had introduced into her concept. So this is how she names him: Vatomer Rachel, Naftule Elokim, Niftaltiim Achoti, Gam Yocholti. Vatikra Shmo Naphtali. As with so many of these naming formulations or the blessings that Yaakov gives, the language is very dense here and it's very difficult. But we definitely see a word play. Naftule Elokim Niftaltiim Achoti. So a double language here of Naftule Elokim, we have a number of ways of understanding this, and we're going to look at a number of translations or interpretations. But let's say here, the simplest, and I didn't bring it here for you. I don't think I did. Rashi here, Naftule Elokim. Rashi, I have been wrestling with God. I wrestled with God, and or I was intertwined. Naftule, from the language here, the verb or the root pei taf lamed, like a patil, right? Like a patil means not a single thread, but an intertwined thread. That's a strong thread made from a twine, essentially, is what it means. I have twined myself with God. Niftaltiim achoti. I have intertwined myself with my sister. Naftule Elokim, niftalti emachoti. I've been attached to God or attached to my sister. Gam yacholti. I too have persevered. I too am able. So I'm not translating this very clearly because there's no clear translation. I was just trying to remain faithful to the meaning of wrestling, right? I've wrestled with God and wrestled as well with my sister. You'll see that that doesn't quite accord with the translation that Svarya supplies, because this translation is based on a different explanation. Here I chose in that initial translation to say Naftule Elokim, Elokim in the sense of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, of God, right? A divine intertwinings, or either I wrestled with God, or there have been divine wrestlings that have taken place that I have wrestled with my sister. So here, even in the broadest sense, what we're looking at is Rachel saying, I have had a contest. I have contended in a fundamental way. Mighty contests have I had, perhaps with God, but definitely with my sister. There's a reference here to Leah and to her relationship with Leah, and a triumph over that conflict. Gam yacholti, I too have been able, I have persevered. So let's try and break down the meaning of this son's name, but all the while understanding that he represents a triumph of Rachel, far more than Dan represents. Dan represents.
Doesn't the word vataha od imply that the baby is in fact Rachel's, and therefore that's real intertwining?
Well, okay, yes, this is like a
Odd,
second, right?
odd.
This is a second, one on the heels of the other, right? Like a new force, but a continuation of the first, but a lightening, an alleviation of her burden, far more than Dan represented. And we'll see that played out in Naphtali, in the blessings that are given to Naphtali by Yaakov and by Moshe. But just trying to arrive at what his name could mean. Let's look first. I had mentioned Rashi, who preserves here the divine element. Like there's that Elokim means divine, which is why you have the Shem Hashem as represented as Elokim and not Elohim. Now Radak says, no, that's not exactly what Elohim means. Elohim means mighty. We have, for instance, Ir Gdola Elohim, a mighty city. When you use the word Elohim, the intent is to talk about how severe or how serious the issue is. Naftule Elokim, mighty wrestlings. Chizukim gedolim nitchazakti emachoti. I had major confrontation or a major issue with my sister that I had to deal with. Ka'adam nitpasem chavero mitchazek imo, like one who is kind of wrestling with his friend and who betters him, who gets the and who overcomes him. Lirot miyachol mechavero miyapilat chavero, where they're intertwined and they're seeing who is going to come out on top. And in the wrestling, we see this entanglement of the two bodies. And this is what the language, the Radak is saying, is conveying. There was this great entanglement that I had with my sister, yet I emerged triumphant, is what Rachel is saying here. That's why the root that she's utilizing here is the root of twining, of entanglement. I'll ask everybody to mute, just to make sure that I'm heard. It's the idea of being caught up. הפתיל שהוא מדובק בשני חוטים כשיכפל ויהיה שזור והוא יותר חזק. The idea is that When a single strand or a single piece of material is alone, it doesn't have the strength as if it were intertwined or doubled over onto itself and then made stronger. So that's what this root naftali means. It means bound up with the other, or it means intertwined or entangled. And the idea Radak here says of the word Elohim means mighty entanglements have I had, that I have wrestled mightily, in the sense, perhaps, to be like my sister. I have done everything that I possibly could, Rachel said, to be like Leah, to be fertile like Leah. I have sacrificed my relationship to a certain extent with my husband by bringing Bilhah into the family so that I too can be built, just as my sister has been built. Naftule Elohim, I have gone to great lengths to be caught up with my sister. And yes, look, I have triumphed. It's not just Dan who I have produced, it's also this other son. And that's why she calls him Naphtali. Now, that's Radak's understanding, wrestling mightily so that I can so that I can be like my sister. The Malbim and Rashi, oh, I do bring Rashi here at the end. The Malbim and Rashi have a slightly different understanding of this complex formulation, and they base their understanding on a verse in Numbers that utilizes the word patil. Patil again, meaning twined, or a strong fastening, like this, implying a binding that's strong. And here the context is about vessels inside of an impure space that might that might take on tum'ah. And the question is if you have an open vessel or if you have a closed vessel. An open vessel inside of an impure space would take on that impurity. A closed vessel would not. And so the verse here in formulating that says, V'chol kli patuach, every open vessel, which is defined as one that asher ein samid patil alav, that doesn't have a lid fastened down. Tamehu, then it gets impurity. Now, our purpose here is this word patil. Samid patil, the Ibn Ezra says, is a double fastening. It's not enough to just have a loose lid. You need to kind of have, make sure that the lid is very firmly secure on the vessel. I've spent a great deal of time studying vessels from the ancient world, and the lids are almost, are almost airtight. That's what we're talking about here, an airtight lid. And the word here that is implying this airtightness is this patil, this fastened on very strongly. So let's see how the Malbim will use this verse to elucidate Naphtali's name. Naftule Elokim, the Malbim is bringing us back to Rachel's naming. Milashon smid patil. This means something which is firmly connected, something which is firmly bound. Shehu me'inyan kisoy bechotem. The concept here is that it's something that is sealed, that is hidden and sealed. When you have a tzmid patil on a kli, then you can't see what the inside is. You can't just peek in. It's very firmly contained. Rotzel amar, what is meant here is that Rachel is saying, ha'inyanim shebeni uvein achoti, matters between myself and my sister, the matters that are beyond our ken, madua yalda hi v'lo anochi, why she was able to be fertile, why she had children, and yet I am barren. Yesh bazeh naftule elokim. These are divine matters. Naftule elokim. These divine matters, niftaltiam achoti, I suffered, I was bound up with my sister. Divine matters of why she was fertile and I wasn't. Hainu sodot elokim, vidvarim ne'elmim mechusim me'en basar, asher bam niftal v'nitchaseh inyani, ki mi ya'amod besod Hashem. So these matters that are entirely hidden from my understanding, that are covered up, and only God has reason as to why Leah is fertile and I wasn't. Naftule Elokim, these divine matters, niftalti achoti, that I wrestled with when it came to my sister, why she was fertile and I wasn't. Gam yacholti. It turns out that I too, in my creative way, am able to overcome this limitation of my infertility. Vesbolotam b'simcha. And I can bear them now with joy because of my creative way of getting around this my problem. Ki tzadik Hashem v'yashar mishpatav. For God is righteous and straight are his judgments. So the Malbim here is saying that naftule, getting back to our verse, Naftule Elokim Niftalti Machoti, hitting on a different note than the Radak, not mighty wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister. Like there's a conflict between us, but divine matters that I got bound up with when it came to my sister, I've managed to overcome. That's Malbim's creative formulation here. Rashi takes a similar tack in understanding Naftule Elokim with this verse in Bamidbar, where he begins this way. He disagrees with it, but he begins by bringing the opinion of Menachem ben Sarok. Menachem ben Sarok wrote the Machberet, Parsha b'Machberet. Menachem ben Sarok was a 10th century great grammarian and scholar of biblical Hebrew from Cordoba, I believe. If I even pronounce that correctly, Cordoba, Spain, right? And he was a very important resource for Rashi's commentary on the Torah. And he says here that Menachem, in understanding this very strange formulation, Naftule Elokim, he's the one who brings this verse in Bamidbar Tzamid Patil, a closed fastening. Chiburim me'et hamakom nitchabarti im achoti lizkot levanim. That God has fastened me to my sister so that I too shall merit children. Naftule Elokim niftalti im achoti. The fastenings of God have made me like my sister, have fastened me to my sister, and that we are both now mothers. Now Rashi says slightly different. I don't think that Rashi says, I want to offer a different explanation. Vani mefarsho lashoni keshu fitaltol. He brings a different verse, one from Parshat Ha'azinu, Dor ikeshu fitaltol, a crooked and what's another word for crooked here? Perverse and crooked generation. That's what's being described in the Shirat HaAzino. But here we see Naphtali.
Twisted would be the right word.
Sorry? Twisted. Okay, twisted. Yes, because twining's twisted, absolutely. Twisted generation. So in the sense of not of being closely fastened to my sister, the way Menachem ben Saruk had it, but in the sense of fitaltol, twisted, again, coming back to the same concept of bound. That's the word. That's the meta word for today. Nitakashti v'hiftzarti p'tzirot v'naftulim harbe lamakom liot shava la'achoti. I wrestled mightily with God. I twisted myself into knots so that I could be equal to my sister. And what happened in the end? Hiskim al yadi v'gam yacholti. God ceded to my akshanut, to my stubbornness, to that which I so wished for. Now, we can leave it at that if he didn't bring onkelos here. Rashi here seems to be saying, by my stubbornness in forcing Bilhah into this family dynamic, then I have triumphed. Onkelos wants to soften this somewhat, I believe. I think that that's the right word to use, in understanding that Naphtali is the same language of tefillah. Now, it's true here that the letters are inverted. right? Naphtali and tefillah are not the exact same root. I discussed this at length with someone who's quite knowledgeable um, about dikduk and the idea of letters that are intrinsic to a root sometimes being inverted one onto the other. I don't quite understand it, but it does happen where you will find, for instance, in this case, a strain of understanding naftule Elokim niftalti as I prayed mightily, I beseeched God, I twisted myself in knots, in my interior um, pleading to God. כמו נפתולי אלוקים נפתלתי בקשות החביבות לפניו נתקבלתי ונעתרתי כאחותי. In all of my pleading with God, I was answered and I was made like Leah.
It's
So
very beautiful here, but it's especially that the letters are twisted. It fits with the theme of what we're talking about.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Well, yes, I remember in my conversation with this Rav that definitely came up in this particular circumstance that the very word which means twisted, entangled, and unstraight is then inverted to mean tefillah. And yes, although there are other circumstances where you have three letters and then they are inverted and the meanings are similar, or one meaning is brought to elucidate an unclear root. But that Rav Sajigon will take up that same idea as Onkelos in his understanding of this verse. Naftuli Elokim niftalti, chanina milifnei Hashem chonanti ka'achoti v'tzlachti b'kach. That my pleas before God, that I pleaded with God to be like my sister, and I was successful in these pleas, is a clear language of tefillah. So Rav Sajigon, in the same sense as Onkelos here. So far, just to recap, there's the idea of taking Elohim as the name of God. I beseeched God, or I wrestled with God, or I pleaded with God that He make me like my sister, and that's one way of looking at it. Naftule Elohim is not. It could be that with God, I have been fastened to my sister. God has fastened me tight so that I be just like my sister, and fasten me tight in the same tfisa and the same model as my sister, that I be fertile, and Radak taking a different view of I'm wrestling mightily like my sister. I love him in the language of strong or mighty. And again, just to remind us of that Malbim, which so took me, was taken by divine intrigues, which are far beyond my ken, are something that I've made my peace with, and I've found a creative way around what seemed to be my fate of infertility. Now, this is a wonderful midrash. This Midrash Lekach Tov, that I found offered a new way of looking at this at the how to translate this naming. Um, Okay, let me see if it's all that new. Yes, yes, it is. So the first part is familiar to us from everything that I've tried to develop up until now. Vatomer Rachel naftuli Elokim niftalti, lashon tefillah, just as we saw with Onkelos and Rav Sajigon. Nit nafalti lifnei Elokim. I have fallen all over myself. I think that's the right way to translate this. Vishamat tfilati, right? Like I've twisted into myself. It's such an evocative language of twisting and tefillah intertwined like that. I've fallen all over myself before God so that I can achieve what it is that I want, and He has heeded my prayers, so that I too can be like my sister. Im achoti sheyeh li gidul banim ka'achoti, that I too shall be able to raise children. V'gam yacholti v'utzlachti, I've been successful. Now, this is where the Medrash gets very creative. Davar acher naftule niftalti im achoti lashon pitaltul. So it's a lashon like Rashi had access through the verse in Ha'azinu of twisted, we said, right? Or non-straight. Klomar, b'sha'a shehichniso et Leah leba'ali, when going back to that story of when I agreed to allow Leah into the family, that Leah was brought to my husband Yaakov, rimuet ba'ali, ki'ilu rimu dad shel mala, that we like my sister and I were in cahoots in the sense of scheming and tricking my husband, right? And that we at niftaltiim achoti, I was in consonance with my sister. I was bound to my sister in this scheme. V'gam yacholti. Hayiti Cholal Hodia lo Yaakov. I agreed with Leah because I had every possibility to inform Yaakov, ki ken hem osim, that Lavan and Leah were up to something. But I didn't want to embarrass my sister. So look at what the Midrash does here in a fascinating twist. Yeah, I use that language. Bekavana. What the Medrash does here is Naftule Elokim Niftaltiim Achoti. The subversion of God I achieved with my sister, right? Or divine subversions. And the I don't think the Medrash is very clear there, right? Like I pulled one over on Yaakov and on creation. Gam Yacholti. I could have subverted this whole thing. I could have avoided the whole mess that I find myself in with having a sister who is in this family and who has borne 4 children to Yaakov and who has put me in such deep distress. I could have avoided all of that, but I chose not to. And the what goes unstated is that this child is born from my choice and the aftermath of my choice, that I have found myself now with 2 children that I have provided for this family, and perhaps those children are in merit of the choice that I made to bring Leah into this family. So I was able to, I would say, if I had to summarize this midrash, what the midrash is saying is I was able to gracefully bear subversive matters. I don't know, maybe gracefully is a little bit of a stretch because we know about how distressed she was. So that is as far as Naphtali goes in terms of all we know about him. We're not given much.
Sorry, you used the word subversive.
Yes.
I would suggest perhaps subconscious might be better.
Subconscious. Okay. All right. Subversive, I only meant in the sense of the scheming and the tricking of Yaakov. That was, and the naftule from the lashon of pital told here, the crookedness of how we went about it. Is what the midrash is intimating here. But again, it's a distant midrash, somewhat distant from I think the simplest explanation of this naming is. But getting back in the time that we have left, this half hour now, to unpack the Shevet, because all we've spoken about so far is his name, which takes a lot of time because it's a difficult name to understand. We don't have anything on Naphtali over the course of his life. We have no information. And the next time we get to Naphtali is in the blessing that Yaakov gives to Naphtali. I don't even know if I brought you the blessing here. Naphtali ayala shlucha. Naphtali is a hind that, oh, here, yes. Naphtali ayala shlucha. Naphtali is a hind let loose. Hanoten imre shafer. This is one translation is yields lovely offspring. Or gives forth beautiful sayings or speaks in a beautiful way. Um, any way you want to understand this difficult verse, and we'll get to some different ways to understand it in a bit, it's a positive blessing. There's nothing here about violence. There's nothing here about cursing. There's nothing, cursing in the sense of Ruvain and Shimon and Levi, with the language of arur and the language of loss of status. This seems to be not even, I wouldn't say benign, I would say very positive, very, very abundant, and very beautiful, with this idea of shapir and shefer. So that's what we have of Naphtali. Ayala shlucha, a deer, or in this sense, a hind, this translation, just bounding forth, let loose. And this idea of an ayala shlucha, hold on one second, is something that is echoed, the positive nature of Naphtali's tribal destiny is echoed in the blessing of Moshe, when at the end of Sefer Devarim, when Moshe is blessing the tribe, the Naphtali Amar, and when he speaks to Naphtali, he says of Naphtali, Naphtali Svaratzon. Naphtali is one who is full of favor, or who's fully satisfied, or it's just a language of just satiety, and completion. Umalei birkat Hashem. Sorry?
Satiety.
Satiety. Thank you. And filled, that's what happens when you read and you don't hear. Umalei birkat Hashem. And filled with the blessings of God. Yam v'darom yirasha. His inheritance will be on the west and the south. We'll get to that in a second, because it doesn't at all accord with his nachala. But this is in the same vein of Jacob's blessing to Naphtali is Moses' blessing to Naphtali, of bounty, of fulfillment, of great blessing, and with that, before I get to this short video that I wanted to show you, let's look at how the Abarbanel will tie together this blessing of Moshe with the name Naphtali. And what I've tried to kind of get to, and I keep on forcing this word into the conversation of being bound and fastened and tied. ויותר נכון לפרש שרמז משה רבנו בזה, מה שזכר הפילוסוף what is מם ד' here? מאמר ד', פרק ט', מספר המידות. The best way to understand this is to look at Aristotle. That's what he means by the philosopher here. In his, I think it's pronounced Nicomean Ethics, his great work on ethics, in the fourth chapter, or the fourth book in the ninth chapter. שכבר ימצא מן האנשים אשר תכלית חברתם לרצות חבריהם ולמלא את חפצם. In discussing different character traits and different types of people, there is one type of person who is always seeking the betterment of his fellow, what can be done for his fellow man, and how he can please them. Not someone who's fawning over his fellow in a chanifa, in like in a false flattery type of way. But what can I do for my fellow to help him complete his potential? And then Aristotle would say there are those who are just the opposite, who are shehem akashim ufatal tulim, who are stubborn and who are crooked. Now, this is not Naphtali. Naphtali comes as the antidote to those who are not people pleasers. There is no in between when it comes to this. So in the in between of this personality type, on the one hand, one who is always trying to look for the betterment of his friend and do for his friend, and the other who is stubborn and crooked and not looking out for the other. There's no name for one who is kind of has qualities of both extremes. But that's beside the point. This is the point. Moshe Rabbeinu shavach et Naftali b'tchuna hazot hachavratiyut. Right? Moshe is praising Naphtali with this characteristic of friendliness, of being socially adept, and so not only socially adept, but socially looking for social improvement. And this is what is meant when he gives him the blessing, Naftali svaratzon. That Naphtali, you are someone who is always looking out for the for making the for making the others satisfied, for feeling satisfied when the other is satisfied. B'tov hachevra v'haskama l'chol b'nei adam liot mitiv'o hitratzut l'kol b'nei adam. So it is good for, he's looking out for what's good for society, for what's good for the other, and finding agreement among people. So his very nature is one who is not seeking appeasement per se, but binding, twining, and connectivity between all people. That is what Naphtali is, and that is why he has earned this bracha of svaratzon, because someone who is looking for improvements of others in society, and I'm not talking about someone who is coming and berating others, but someone who is saying, what can I do for you? How can I make your life better? Then that is someone who is just a naturally positive and happy person. And that's what's meant by svaratzon. You're satisfying other people's will, and you're satisfying your own will, Naphtali. And that's a reflection of this name, Naphtali, of the binder Shevet, who essentially connects the different personalities within Am Yisrael through seeking the better good. Now, how is this expressed? There's a whole plethora of midrashim that will insert Naphtali into the Genesis narrative where he's entirely absent. But the reason why these midrashim will do so is to push this concept of Naphtali as the binder. So let's take, for example, a story in Breshit Lamed Aleph, in the 31st chapter of Breshit. Vayishlach Yaakov vayikra l'Rachel u'leLeah hasadeh el tzono. This is after God appeared to Yaakov in Padan Aram, after Yaakov had already had his 11 sons and Dinah, and the time had come, God said, for him to leave Laban's house and return to his father's home, to Eretz Canaan, to become Eretz Yisrael. Now, Vayishlach Yaakov sent, and he called for his wives to come to him so that he could speak privately with them. So here the Yerushalmi is going to say, what is happening behind the scenes? What is meant by Yaakov sent? Vishadar Yaakov yat Naphtali. Yaakov sent his swiftest son. He sent the one who was going to go back to Laban's house, to where Rachel, or to his home, to where Rachel and Leah were in their tents, so that they could come out to the field. Whenever there's a need for a messenger, Naphtali is always the one to go to. Not only, I'm going to argue, because he is described by Yaakov as Ayala Shlucha, as a bounding hind, not only because he was swift of foot. One can say he was just a natural athlete. So he was the best one. He had the most lung capacity. So he's the best one to always send on errands. No, because his personality, his character was about joining two elements that are separate and binding them together. That is always what a messenger does. A messenger takes the potential and delivers it into the actual. Without the messenger, it always remains in potential. The message is never delivered. So that's why whenever we need a messenger throughout the storyline, it's by default going to be Naphtali. So here is one example: V'shadai Yaakov Yat Naphtali Hu Asgar Kalel, that he's like a very fleet-footed ayal deer, and he calls to Rachel and Leah. We'll have another example here. The Midrash will bring in Sefer Hayashar when the brothers had sold Yosef, and they decided to pass that off as Yosef's death, and they took Yosef's tonet pasim, his prized coat that Yaakov had gifted him, and they dipped it in goat's blood. We'll get in a couple weeks' time to who gave them the idea to gift in goat's blood. But once they did so, they're all the way up in Shechem, and Yaakov is down in Hebron. So how are they going to make that at least 3 days journey down? Vayishlechu et haktonet biyad Naphtali el Yaakov aviha. They're going to send it with Naphtali. Naphtali is going to actualize that story by actually bringing the evidence to Yaakov. Now there's a number of stories like this, a number of midrashim like this, and I'll just give you a few more that I didn't bring the sources for. When the brothers are in Mitzrayim, and Yosef has revealed to them that he is still alive, then the Midrash tells us in the Targum Yerushalmi that how did the news get back to Yaakov that Yosef was still alive? Naphtali was dispatched from Mitzrayim to deliver the news back to Yaakov. So it's an inverse of what happens here. First, he tells Yaakov that Yosef is dead, and then he is the one who's able to fix that terrible breach years on by informing Yaakov that that he is indeed alive. That's the Yerushalmi on Breshit Memtet. There's another midrashic source that when Yaakov was being buried, and we know that he died in Egypt, but he was returned to Eretz Israel to be buried, and there's a whole midrashic backstory about his sons bringing his remains back to Eretz Israel. There was in this midrashic story a dispute in Marat HaMachpelah, in the burial site of Yaakov, who deserves to be buried in this burial site. So as part of that midrash, Naphtali is dispatched back to Egypt to retrieve the deed that had been left behind that secured Yaakov's right to be buried in Marat HaMachpelah. Again, not in the verses themselves, but anytime the midrash wants to have someone running back and forth, it's going to be Naphtali. And not only that, but his tribal symbols, both his the tribal symbol that appeared on his distaff, which was an ayala shlucha, a deer, and getting back up here, and the deer is a symbol of a speedy animal, of a bounding forth animal that can cover great distances, and also the even, the stone on the priestly breastplate that symbolized Naphtali was the shvo, which is, according to Rabbeinu Bechai, turquoise. And what is the nature of that stone? According to Rabbeinu Bechai, it gives its rider speed. So a rider would wear turquoise to be able to gain more speed. So all dovetailing into the same concept of Naphtali as the messenger Shevet, but I think that the concept behind being a messenger Shevet is the one who binds the two disparate elements together and brings a sort of synthesis through that dissonance when he is indeed a messenger. So there's this character trait of fleet-footedness, of being very fast, is something that the Midrash is not only going to say is his physical characteristic, but is the underlies his role in Israel as a do-gooder. Naftali ayala shlucha, the Midrash Hagadol says, shahaya ratz la'asot ritzon ha'el. Not that he has again some kinds of superhuman speed, but rather he's not the Flash, but rather he's the force in Israel that is swift, that is connecting, that is binding, and he is binding to do the will of God. In the Midrash is going to pick up on this verse in Tehillim, Chashti v'lo hitma'amati l'shmor mitzvotecha, as reflective of Naphtali. I hurried. I didn't hesitate to fulfill your commands. He's not one who sits and ruminates and thinks and is very thoughtful and delays and hand wrings. He's one who does. He is the executor. He's the one who fulfills.
Bila is a wifey connection to Rachel, who creates Wi-Fi.
Well, yes. Thank you. That's a cute pun. Thank you. Yes. And well, let's just hope our Wi-Fi speed is a high speed. So let's look at this midrash in Bamidbar Rabbah about the Nasi of Naphtali, the prince of Naphtali. Now, in Bamidbar Rabbah, in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, all of the princes are bringing gifts to the Mishkan, and they're all identical gifts, but each gift represents the tribe. So each gift represents something totally different, right? Like you can have identical twins, and who present the same, but they're in character totally different. So the gift of Naphtali represented the forefathers. Keneged ha'avot v'ha'imahot hikriv nasi Naphtali. That his gift was in tribute to the forefathers and foremothers. Lama ken lefi שנפתלי כיבד את אביו יותר מדי, שהיה אביו שלחו לכל מקום שירצה. Naphtali excelled, or perhaps even too much, it says here, in honoring Yaakov and honoring his father. That Yaakov saw Naphtali as his Guy Friday. I know there's a Girl Friday. The one who he could send out on any errand. And he found him just very pleasant to be around. Vayuam Rav Ni'imim alav, that whatever Naphtali would say would be something that that Yaakov would be delighted by. Ulekach birchu aviv b'ayala shlucha, shayaratz b'mishlacho ka'ayal. And that's why his father Yaakov blessed him that he be this bounding forth hind. And he was blessed with Imre Shefer, with producing beautiful words that would then be a testament to the tribe. I just want to make sure we get to all these sources before our time is up. That is why the golden boy of Naphtali is Barak from Kedesh Naphtali, from Shevet Naphtali. Barak is the counterpoint to Devorah. And the Midrash here says Barak is the expression of Imre Shefer. He's the expression of one who has beautiful words. What were the beautiful words of Barak? What so suited Barak to his Shevet? Why is Barak the perfect expression of Naphtali? Because Barak is essentially the executor. He is not the initiator. Dvorah, the shofetet, the nevi'ah of that time, was the visionary, She was the illuminator. She was the dominant force. And she calls Barak to Har Tavor and to gather all of the troops to fight against Sisera and Yavin Melech Chatzor. And what does Barak respond to her? Vayomer eleha Barak, im telchi mi bahalachti, vim lo telchi mi lo elech. If you go with me, then I'll go, but if not, I won't go. I am the executor of a vision. I need you to come with me. This isn't speaking from a point of weakness. This is speaking from a point of understanding that one's role. In the case of Naphtali, his role is to bring something that is in potential into actuality, but he himself is not the initiator. And let's see how Rav Hirsch puts this. If you could assign some kinds of a mission to a deer, right, to a hind, he's now explicating the blessing that Yaakov gives to Naphtali. It would most certainly be one who is eager to execute, one who can carry out the task. Al kain, shlichut shehutla al Naphtali, tvutsa b'mhirut. Any task that was given to Naphtali, he executed. And he did it quickly, swiftly. He was not the initiator of the task. He was the executor of it. Naphtali enenu holech b'drachim mishalo. Naphtali does not go in his own ways, right? He's one who is svaratzon. He builds up social capital by seeing others' visions through to their completion. Hu poel rak b'shlichut ha'acherim. He only acts to help others, to help others complete their shlichut, to complete their missions. He's like the shadchan, right? Who's going to bind together this one with that one so that the vision can come to fruition. Ulam davar shuchlat al yedei acherim letovat haklal yisagel hu la'atzmo v'yivtzaenu b'zrizut u'v'i'ilut. But that is that anything that is decided upon, that he decides that would be for the benefit of all, then he can take upon himself to execute with hastiness, with speediness, not hastiness, and effectivity. So he is again the one who will bring Am Yisrael together, and is one of these shvatim that, although we can call him quote unquote a minor shevet, I think is an essential. All shvatim are essential, but his essential role is to draw Am Yisrael together. In the few minutes that I have left, I just want to look at the Mesilat Yesharim with you, because this Mesilat Yesharim, this section here from the writing of the Ramchal, his book on, or his homily on character improvement, speaks to me very strongly about the character of Naphtali, and that character, which is such while very much representative of the tribe of Naphtali, is something also that I think is representative of the drive within Am Yisrael themselves to be ratz katzvi, to be eager to fulfill the will of God. And it's a little bit of like a new, but let's, a little bit of tochacha to us all, but let's look at it together. A person's nature exercises a strong downward pull upon him. Neglect of his responsibilities is due not to an inadequate recognition of his duty, nor to any other cause, but the increasing weight of his laziness upon him. He says, I will eat a little, I will sleep a little, or it is hard for me to leave the house, or I've taken off my shirt, how can I put it on again? Or it is very hot outside, or it is very cold, or it is raining too hard, all the excuses and all the other excuses and pretenses that fills the mouth of fools, including my foolish mouth. Whatever the cause, the Torah is neglected, divine service dispensed with, and the Creator abandoned. And the power, the character of Naphtali comes to combat that, comes to remind us that we have that our time here is meant not only to dream and to come up with a grand vision, but to carry it out, to serve our fellow, and to act on behalf of others so that we bring blessing into the world and onto ourselves. As the Rambam summarizes in his Sefer Emunah Bitachon, the character of Naphtali and the asset that we have in the Naphtali as a force within Am Yisrael. Shenekra Naphtali al Shem Naphtali Elokim Niftalti. Naphtali was called by Rachel after the connection. I've twined myself with God. Shehu lashon chibur. That is, it is the language of connectivity. L'chaber kol yachad shivtei Yisrael, to connect together all of the different tribes of Israel. So this messenger Shevet, the one who will always be called upon to execute a vision or to see something through, as I put it, the messenger was the binder and the enabler. The creativity and originality might come from elsewhere, but the messenger serves to actualize the idea and make it real. And that is something critical that we have to have as Am Yisrael, not just the great visionaries, but those who are going to execute those visions. And those who might be behind the scenes, one can say, the ones who are building the sets and who are doing the costumes and who are actually producing the production and not the stars of the show. But without them, there is no show. So I will, in the few minutes that I have left, I will talk about the Nachala of Naphtali as reflective of this binder Shevet, a Shevet who can be so expansive in his character that he's always considering what would serve others and not what would serve himself, is one who deserves the most expansive Nachala. And that is why his Nachala is the bounding forth of the Galil, of the northern expanses of Israel, a huge Nachala, arguably, although I'm biased, but I do think that it is the most beautiful of the Nachalot, and I think also it is the most connecting of the Nachalot. What do I mean by that? Before I get to that, you'll see that the semel of Pikud HaTzafon, of the IDF, of their northern command, is the Ayala, taken from the fact that most of the north belongs to Nachalat Naphtali. And I'll point out here that the Ayal, the deer, it has horns that have all kinds of pitulim, like all kinds of, it's not a gazelle, it's not an ibex, it's not like a single horned, it's two horns, but there are all kinds of twists and turns, which on the one hand very much suits the flora, or the landscape of the north and its thickets, but also symbolically, I guess, does evoke Naphtali's character as intertwined and tangled up within his nation. He is not separate from his nation, but he's very much tangled up with it to execute the vision of his nation and for the betterment of his nation. And I'll before we get to this last little video, which is just some nice uncontained but generous of spirit Shevet, in his generous of spirit Nachala, is that the north and I don't know if it's going to stay this way, but I guess traditionally speaking is the place that Israelis go to vacation. And hopefully now with the things calm down in the north, we'll get more vacationers over the summer up to the north. It's definitely the cooler part of the country, but also just anecdotally, it's a place where there's much less tension. I guess that's just how things worked out, that most of the country's population lives in Ephraim, Dan, Yehuda, and Binyamin, tightly there in the center of the country. And the north is just much more open, more sparsely populated, and you can breathe a little bit more easy. And I think that is reflective of the character of Naphtali. So I think that to a certain degree, the Naphtali of the Bible and his Nachalah is reflected in current day Israel and current day Nachalat Naphtali. I'll just take you to some of this gorgeous video, and we can end with that. So you can see some of what I mean by Ayala Shlucha, right? And let me just turn off the sound here. Hold on 1 second. So I can talk over the sounds. What I had wanted to say was that oh, I'm forgetting. Okay, while I try and remember, does anyone have any questions or any comments on Naphtali? Oh yes, I know what I wanted to say. Okay, here's where with what I wanted to end. I didn't clarify when he was given the bracha of Yam and Darom. That seems very strange because Yam and Darom is seems to be the south, the west, and the south. Right now, Naphtali's Nachala is up in the northeast of Israel. What you see here is Emek HaChula. You see that the Chula, the Chula Valley and the bird migration. This is Ramat Naphtali up here, and vast stretches as well, a little bit off to the west, but it's definitely not a westbound Shevet. Here's Rosh Pinah. And why then is he blessed with Yam Vidarom, the west and the south? Now, the way that this is traditionally understood is that Yam doesn't mean west, but here it means the Kinneret, the Sea of Kinneret. All around the Kinneret are cities of Naphtali. Here's a tel called Tel Kinneret, from which the sea gets its name. And down here is Tel Rakat and Tel Hamat. And these are cities that belong to Naphtali. And so Yam Vidarom, not only did he get the Yam, but he got this southern part, which was the best area to go fishing. So you not only get the sea abutting and adjacent to Nahalat Naphtali, but you also get the industry of the sea, and that's how Yam and Darom is understood. So, are there any questions? And if not, then I think we are done for today. Just check the comments.
Hi, just one fast question. I love your lectures are fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you. How could Rachel say that she's equal to her sister when her sister has 4 children and she has 2 surrogate children?
Shaveh, in the sense, not necessarily is equal. First of all, the pasuk says ki gam yacholti, I too have been able, where it doesn't say specifically the language of I am equal to her. But when the Medrash says, or when the Mefarshim say shaveh, it means that I am on equal footing now that I am in the game, so to speak, but not even Stephen.
Right.
Does the Netziv make any comment about the name of Naphtali, which is his name, and because he is a communicator?
Naphtali Tzvi Yehuda. I mean, he's Naphtali Tzvi. He's also Yehuda. I don't know. I don't know. I would have to look at
Tamar?
Because
Yeah.
he is a prime communicator, isn't he?
The Netziv?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and one of the powerhouse Mefarshim, absolutely.
Okay, so Tamar, hi, it's Sandra. Thank you so much. Wow. So I have a question. Is it a little bit of a bending over backwards to elevate Barak because of the Naphtali connection? Specifically, what was said about him, that it was he who, on behalf of that the Medrash said, on behalf of him, God, Hashem gave Sisera into the hands of Israel, whereas specifically Devorah says absolutely not, because he was a dilatory character, and that's what she said. Because you hesitated, God will give Sisera into the hands of Israel, into the hands of the women, and it would be, of course, we know Yael on the one hand and Devorah on the other. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time. I love it, make my living interpreting Midrash, but in this particular case, doesn't it seem like it's quite a stretch? Because I mean, Barak, I don't think anybody can say that it was Barak who ran Naphtali Katzvi to do Devorah's bidding. He basically said, I'm not going, and I'm only going if you go first, and don't blame me. So I think it just troubles me that if anybody hasn't read the text itself and is reading with a nod, or even a sleepy nod, the Midrash, they'll get a totally different impression from what the text says, and that's slightly troubling.
Yeah, I hear. I'm looking back at the language of the Medrash and Bamidbar Rabbah. Lekach zachan Naphtali shasa Kadosh Baruch Hu nikama b'Sisra al yedei Barak shaya mikadesh Naphtali.
That's absolutely the exact opposite of what Devorah says. So that's troubling.
Right, but I think it's that like Naphtali here is going to take a secondary role, and that's why he was the man of the hour, while there was the illuminary woman of the month, let's say.
No, so I really get that without him, it's sort of like what they call in the Latin business, a sine qua non. Without that particular cog in the wheel, it could not have turned. But that's different from the enormous praise that the Breshit Rabbah heaps on him, which is literally flies in the face of Devorah's, I won't even say anger. I don't know I can't even imagine how she felt at the time.
It's possible, it's a very good point you're making. It's possible that Yael is the Ayala Shalucha that comes to represent Naphtali. Yael, Ayala Shalucha.
That's not what I'm referring to right now. I really appreciate you. But what I'm particularly, I'm focusing on the Midrash, the words of the Midrash, and how they really do fly in the face of the words of the text that came out of Devorah's lips. So that's why I'm asking you.
Unless we're going to understand, Ulekach berchu be'imrei shefer al shayu amarav shfarim, in that, like, there was something about what Barak was forcing that might have angered, or might have frustrated Devorah.
Yes.
But was more reflective of the reality of that time, which is that I'm not going to do this without you. That we are incapable as an without our ima. We need to have our mother here. Even though you want us to be able to do this on our own, we are not yet ready for that.
I like that. I like that.
I mean,
It could be what you're saying is perfectly correct, because we have to look at the history of that time, how split or how divided or not united there were the Shvatim at that time.
Exactly.
So he really needed Vorah to get the troop.
Right.
No, I get all that.
Once she did it, he took it over.
So I would only say here that the Imre Shefer is not anything like in his forcing her hand, basically saying, I can't do this without you, is just a real, it's like the Shadchan who's going to bring the two sides like down to earth and say, you need a compromise, like with all of your vision, Devorah, it's not mentioned divided as a nation to draw together. We need you here. That's the only.
I like that. Yeah, thank you. That actually is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, going now, Irini, I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if you're still with us, but the source sheet was up. I hope that you saw it. I was working this whole shear not with the source sheet, right? Everybody had access to a source sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah, the source
Okay,
sheet
great.
is up, Tamar, she was probably referring to posting it for download.
Oh,
the
I
one-
always send it to the office and I'm always,
The office put the wrong one up.
oh, all right. I'll ask them about that. Wrestling of the
Hi,
sisters
Dave.
about bearing children is uncomfortable.
Thank you
I'm
very
just,
much.
B'simcha, b'simcha. I'm just going through these,
I had one quick question about,
yeah,
possible to ask one more question.
yeah.
There seems to be some kind of irony about the initial deception on the wedding night, causing both sisters pain and embarrassment down the road, affecting the sons and how Reuben felt about Leah, how
Yes.
Rachel felt about herself. That and it's a shame.
It is. You're right.
That
I think
initial,
you're hitting on something.
it's ironic.
Yeah. It's something that you're hitting on something that's a fundamental truth, I believe, to any kinds of Rama'ut. Rama'ut might be necessary. Rivka saw that Rama'ut was necessary in the case of Yaakov and Esav, and Leah and Rachel, they conducted this Rama'ut with to get around this situation. It's pain. It will bring pain. I gave a share in the Esther series about the pain that the scheming of Yaakov and the deception of Yaakov towards Yitzchak and the stealing of the bracha caused for Am Yisrael. It causes great pain. There's no way around it. It might be necessary. There are things that we do sometimes that are necessary, but they will cause pain. It's the complication, I believe, of life. Maybe someone has more of a satisfying way of looking at it, but okay. This wrestling of the sisters about bearing
Seems
children
to
is
go around. What goes around goes around.
Yeah. The wrestling of the brothers before their birth. These two sisters who might have been meant to marry these two brothers. Let me take that again. Let me see, because
One brother.
it was like what you write, Ruthie. This wrestling of the sisters about bearing children. Sorry. Let me just get to this one comment. This wrestling of the sisters about bearing children is an uncomfortable echo of the wrestling of the brothers before their birth. These two sisters who might have been meant to marry these two brothers. Yes. There's all kinds of pitulim. There's yeah, for as much as Yaakov might have been a Yaakov Ish Tam, his life is full of intrigue and sorrow and pain. Okay. Yes. Margot, you know what? I'll mention something at the beginning of next week's shiur about holding comments to the end. Thank you for that comment. I was thinking that had the name Yaakov not already been in the family, perhaps Rachel might have used that name to express the twistedness she was feeling. Yes, there's and I wonder sometimes about these names. Like I wondered, I wrote it even in the book, and I wonder our firstborn's name Ruvain. And who doesn't name their child Shimon or Ruvain or or Dan? I mean, these are massive forces within Am Yisrael, but they're not Naphtali. Naphtali, though, while his name does reflect, the wrestling, he is. If anyone's looking for a name for which you can develop beautiful, easy divrei Torah for a brit and for a bar mitzvah and for Shabbat brachot, etc., Naphtali is your guy. Naphtali and Asher. They're the two who they're golden boys through and through.
Tamar, I made that comment. It's Sim. I made that comment before the rest of the year, and I would amend it now or add to it that it's almost a tikkun for the the crookedness of Yaakov. It's almost we can take a twisting and make it something beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
Make it a joining.
That's what he's always trying to do.
Right.
He's always trying to, bring peace between his brothers. I just find it, I don't know, maybe it's because I live up here in this, I live in Nahalat Naphtali. And I think I'll just share something on a personal note. I think having moved from Yehuda to Naphtali, and it could be because I think so much about the Shvatim, and it could be, this is just flights of fancy, that I think that there's a certain, perhaps on a personal level, a loosening that I felt, and more of an ability, could also just be coming from age, more of an ability to take a step back and try and figure out what works best for other people. So anyway, so I don't know, just my musings.
I just want to say one thing, that it's really always a pleasure to hear your shiurim and the enthusiasm, but to hear your love of Naphtali is so fantastic.
Oh,
and
I can't get enough of Naphtali. Actually, and when we get to Yisachar is my favorite sheva. But my moshav is on the border between Yisachar and Naphtali. So while I live in Nachalat Naphtali, the southernmost reach of Nachalat Naphtali, for the first 3 years living in the moshav, I lived in Yisachar. So on my morning walk, I walk back and forth between these two nachalot, and I love them both equally. And I'm always trying to figure out which one I am drawn to more. Little fusion of the two. Okay, getting back to what Ruth said. It seems Lekach Tov Midrash is not referring to the Medrash that suggests that Rachel and Leah were cahoots. The Lekach Tov writes, they brought Leah to my husband. Rachel is being presumptuous here, and they tricked him. I could have done something to stop that deception before it would have been too late. Let me get back to that Lekach Tov. Are you still there, Ruthie? Okay. She's not there, but
No, I'm still here.
Oh, yeah, okay, fine. Tamar right, where are we? Naftali lashon pitaltol. Klomar b'sha'ah shechnisu et Leah leba'ali. When they brought Leah to Yaakov, rimu et Ba'ali, they tricked Yaakov, ki'ilu rimu dad shamala, as if they were managing to trick God. Would you agree with that reading?
That's it. So
Yeah.
it's a they, which is interesting that Lekach Tov he's not reading the text, which just says, and Lavan, he brought her.
Right.
So
But
that
everybody
already, so that's interesting that the Lekach Tov he's already droshing something else going
he's
on.
expanding it.
Yeah. So
I did like, though, that like Vigam Yacholti, that reading of, I could have sabotaged this whole thing.
Yes, I like
but
that.
I chose not to.
And
and I deserve this son. This son is my triumph for holding my tongue. And like, that's Naphtali doesn't have to hold his tongue. He doesn't really have a tongue. He's always delivering somebody else's tongue. Yes, thank you, Varda. The Israel Post symbol is Ayala Shlucha, halavai, that it should be so. The Israel Post is the slowest body that we have here. Yes, Guy Friday. Oh, I'm glad to know that. Okay, lightning speed is an expression, speed of lightning speed. Yes. Oh, Barak. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Baruch Hashem. Okay, Yofi. So Bezrat Hashem, next week we go move to God. Back to Leah. Okay. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you.
Be well. Bye.